Good morning. Welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time here, I'll invite you to please subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell so you can get notifications for future videos. I'd appreciate that. And today I want to share with you something that I made about 3 years ago. This is an extension for my Crosscut Sled. I looked on YouTube when I had the idea, figuring that I'd be able to find one on YouTube and see how other guys had made it. At that time, about 3 or 4 years ago, I did not find one video covering this type of a jig. With this jig, I can add it to my Crosscut Sled. I can make repetitive, extended length cuts with 100% accuracy. So today, I'll show you the evolution of this, how it started, why it started. I'll give you some measurements and explain to you how I built it. So let's get started. So the evolution of this jig starts with trying to make repetitive cuts at the table saw. So say we're trying to cut something that's 8 inches. You set your fence to 8 inches. Just for clarity, I'm showing you, I'm coming in here about 8 inches right from the side of the fence. You set up your piece, you grab your miter gauge, and also when I was looking for that jig that I made that I'm going to share with you today, you can find extensions for your miter gauge, whether they're made by guys in the shop or they're commercially available from any number of manufacturers. It didn't do what I needed it to do. I only have the miter gauge that came with my saw. I didn't want to spend $200 or more just for a new miter gauge to get myself going. So that's how this started. So now I see guys do this all the time. I see guys doing videos on YouTube doing this. They set up their fence and they want to make repetitive cuts with their miter gauge. This is a recipe for disaster. If you're a seasoned, experienced woodworker, you know this. But for the benefit of woodworkers who are just getting started, let me explain. When you try to cut this, you have a force here against the fence. You have a force here on this side of the blade, and you have a force here pushing through. If this piece of wood gets bound in here, it's going to kick back, potentially causing you a serious injury. So the way to do that, so this is at 8 inches. I'm going to put a block on here, okay? Remeasure my 8 inches, which is about 8 3/4 now. Okay, you measure out to the block, you get 8 inches, you lock your fence, you move the block down here. You secure the block to your fence. Now, when you make your measurement over to your 8 inches, you're against the block. As you come forward, now you don't have any of these opposing forces, and you can push this piece right through and make repetitive cuts coming up against the block. That was the first thing. Not wanting to spend a lot of money on a new miter gauge, I decided I wanted to make a jig to work with my crosscut saw. So let's move on to that. This is my crosscut sled. This is a Nick Ferry crosscut sled. You can look at his channel, Nick Ferry, F-E-R-R-Y. He did a great job on this sled. There was no need for me to try to reinvent the wheel to come up with another sled. I paid him the $15 for the plan. The sled came out great. It's within 0.02 of an inch over 24 inches. You want to make sure you watch his video and watch his 5-cut method for squaring up the sled. And there's also another tremendous video by William Ng, NG is his last name, NG, William Ng, who does a tremendous explanation of the 5-cut method to make sure your sled is square. So this is, I made a few different changes to this sled from what Nick did. Nick had a piece on the top with the Craig flip stop. I opted to make my own stop and my own cursor. And I'll do another short video on how to make a cursor if you'd like to. So let's get to the jig. This is how I decided to make this jig. I already had the piece of T-track in here. So on my stop, I have a T-nut. And since I already had the T-slot, T-track, I decided to put T-nuts on my jig so I can slide it in and set it up. So let's move the camera a little closer to give you a good idea of what I'm doing here. So before I made the jig, I was looking for a way to make these accurate, repetitive cuts longer than I was able to with my crosscut sled. This sled on this side of the blade goes out to 12 inches. So here's what I came up with at first, similar to a story stick. This one was 22 3/4. I have another one here that I had. This was 37 inches. And the way these work, you can do this. This works great. You come forward and you bring your stick up to just the leading edge of the blade. Remember, this may be repetitive for some, but if you're newer, you have one tooth pointing this way, you have one tooth pointing that way, and then you have a straight tooth on most of these blades. I'll refer to this edge, the cutting edge, as the leading edge, and I'll refer to this side as the trailing edge. So you bring your stick up to just the leading edge of the blade, put a clamp on it like this to hold it down. That's all you need. Now you can take your piece. All I did was I measured out till I had 22 3/4, made a mark, glued and brad nailed a little piece to the stick, and I had essentially a story stick. So now I can come over here, I can make repetitive cuts at 22 3/4 all day long, dead on accurate. So it became cumbersome having all these sticks at different lengths. That's how I finally got to the jig. So I have 2 T-nuts that I set up to come into the track. As far as T-nuts go, you can buy them online, or you can just buy carriage bolts. I grind them down on the grinder, put a couple of flats on it. You got T-bolts. So you can see this is just 2 pieces of scrap wood that I had, make an L. On the back part, I refer to this as the back, I guess, and the bottom. On the back, I cut a slot with a router, or you could do it with a dado set, and I put in the T-track. On the bottom edge, I put a piece of self-adhesive measuring tape. You'll notice that my sled, this side of the blade from this leading edge of the blade goes out to 12 inches. So you might notice that on this jig, I start right at the 12-inch mark. So I'm gonna, anything over 12 inches, this is the piece that got cut off from that measuring tape. And I went out to a useful measurement of 39 inches. You can make this whatever you want. This is just random. For me, in my small shop, when I get out past that, Now I'm having a problem with interference hitting my bench. So this is long enough for just about anything I'd want to do in my shop. As far as the stop block, it's just a couple of pieces of birch plywood I had hanging around. I put a little piece of 1/4-inch Luan spacer in there, a knob and a bolt, a T-nut bolt, and that's it. That's the whole jig. So let me just show you how I put it together. Slides right into the T-slot. I come over and I mark the edge of the jig right to the leading edge of the blade. Just barely touch the blade. I have a compound miter saw to make repetitive cuts if I had to, but in my small shop, I don't really have room to set up a dedicated compound miter saw stand like a lot of guys have. So this is my alternative. It works great for me. I know now that I can make repetitive cuts out to 39 inches. So wherever you set it, come back in, just measure to the leading edge of the blade, confirm your measurement before you start to cut. As you go through, you're going to come right by the edge of that blade. Your cuts are going to be perfect every time. So let me give you some measurements. My overall length of this is 40 3/4. Slide it off again. The bottom piece is 1 3/4 inches, and the back piece is 2.5. I don't know if you can see that. Make sure I'm getting it in front of the camera. 2.5, 1 3/4. So again, just set up to right to the leading edge. You want to be up against the tooth that points in this direction. Right up against that tooth on the leading edge. That's it. Tighten it up. Off you go. You can make repetitive cuts with 100% accuracy all day long with this jig. I hope this has been helpful. I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there that'll say, I wish I had thought of that. Make yourself one. It's a terrific time saver, and it's a great jig to have. I'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Hit the bell. Get notifications for future videos. And we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.